India versus Pakistan in 2026 remains one of the most important military comparisons in the world, because this rivalry is not only about numbers, but about strategy, deterrence, geography, and the ability to survive a crisis. India has the larger overall military and the stronger economy, while Pakistan keeps a leaner force built around quick response, escalation control, and nuclear deterrence. That difference shapes everything from budgets to air power to how both sides would actually fight. The key thing to understand is that this is not a simple comparison of who has more tanks or who has more jets. It is a comparison of two very different military models. India is building toward long-term regional dominance. Pakistan is building to make sure India can never treat a war as easy, clean, or one-sided. That is why the balance between them is still so dangerous in 2026. If you look only at size, India clearly leads. It has the bigger army, the stronger navy, the larger defense budget, and the more powerful industrial base. It also has more room to modernize over time and absorb losses in a prolonged conflict. Pakistan does not have that luxury. It must be selective, efficient, and focused on the parts of the military balance that can create the most pressure on India. But the numbers do not tell the whole story. Pakistan has spent decades preparing for a different kind of war, one where it does not need to outbuild India in every category. Instead, it relies on speed, defensive depth, missile forces, air defense, and the threat of escalation. That means India may be stronger overall, but Pakistan is still dangerous enough to shape how India thinks about every major military decision. Start with manpower. India has one of the largest armed forces in the world, with a much larger active duty force and a far deeper reserve structure than Pakistan. That gives India more strategic depth. It can rotate units more effectively, sustain operations longer, and absorb more pressure across multiple fronts. Pakistan's force is much smaller, but it is tightly focused on the India front, which means it can be mobilized with sharp attention to one main theater. That difference matters, because war is not just about who can win the first battle. It is about who can stay effective after the first week, the first month, and the first round of losses. India has the advantage in endurance. Pakistan has to rely on speed, concentration, and the ability to make India pay a high price early. That is why the Pakistani military remains a serious force, even though it is smaller overall. On the ground, India also has the edge in armor, artillery, and logistics depth. Its army has a much broader base, more platforms, and more room to modernize over time. Pakistan's army is not weak, but it has to make every major capability count. It focuses on mobility, defensive positioning, and fast battlefield response. The idea is not to match India tank for tank. The idea is to create enough resistance that India cannot treat the land war as a simple numbers game. That means the ground balance is not just about equipment, it is about doctrine. India wants to be able to apply pressure at scale. Pakistan wants to deny India the ability to do that cheaply. If a crisis ever escalates, that difference becomes very important very fast. India's bigger land force gives it more options. Pakistan's concentrated posture gives it more ability to complicate those options. The Air Force comparison is where things become more dynamic. India has the larger and more diverse Air Force, with more aircraft, more support platforms, and a broader modernization path. It has more room to build a layered air campaign if needed. Pakistan's Air Force is smaller, but it is one of the most operationally focused branches in the region. It has spent years emphasizing readiness, pilot quality, and the ability to respond quickly. In air combat, raw numbers matter, but they are not everything. Aircraft quality, pilot training, command and control, sensor integration, and weapon loading all matter too. India has the advantage in overall scale, but Pakistan can still create real problems in the opening phase of a conflict. That is especially true if a fast crisis gives the Pakistani Air Force the chance to use its concentration and readiness effectively. India is also working toward a more modern air posture that is not just about having more jets, but about building a more flexible and connected force. That includes fighters, airborne warning assets, electronic warfare, and strike capability. Pakistan, meanwhile, has tried to preserve a credible deterrent posture with a smaller fleet that can still impose costs. So the air picture is not one of total imbalance. It is more like India has the stronger hand, while Pakistan tries to make every exchange risky. The missile balance is where Pakistan tries hardest to narrow the gap. Missile forces are central to Pakistani deterrence because they let Islamabad threaten retaliation even if it cannot match India across every conventional category. That matters in a rivalry where Pakistan knows it cannot compete in total defense spending or broad industrial depth. Missiles give Pakistan a way to maintain strategic relevance and deter escalation. India has also expanded its missile and precision strike capabilities, and that is a major part of its long-term military modernization. India wants more range, more accuracy, and more flexibility in a crisis. Its missile posture is not just about response. It is about shaping the strategic environment, creating deterrence, and making sure it can act across multiple domains if needed. This is one of the most important parts of the entire comparison, because missile forces directly influence how each side thinks about war. If India can strike accurately and Pakistan can retaliate rapidly, then neither side can assume a simple or limited outcome. That is why missile power matters so much in South Asia. It is not just another category. It is one of the main reasons the rivalry remains dangerous. At sea, India has a much clearer advantage. The Indian Navy is far stronger than Pakistan's Navy, both in scale and in strategic reach. This matters because India's geography gives it a huge maritime responsibility. It has to protect trade routes, energy flows, island territories, and a vast coastline. It also wants to remain the dominant maritime power in the Indian Ocean region. Pakistan's navy is much smaller, but it still serves an important role in Pakistan's defense posture. Its focus is more on coastal defense, submarine operations, and sea denial than on broad blue water projection. That means Pakistan is trying to make waters around its coast harder to operate in, not trying to dominate the entire region. India, by contrast, has the ability and the ambition to operate much farther from its shores. That difference matters a lot because naval power is about reach. It is about presence, deterrence, and the ability to shape events across a large area. India has far more of that ability than Pakistan does. In a major crisis, that maritime edge would give India more options and more leverage. Pakistan's navy could still cause problems close to home, but it cannot match India's broader naval posture. Defense spending is another major gap. India's defense budget is much larger than Pakistan's, which gives New Delhi a major advantage in modernization, procurement, training, and sustainment. That budget gap matters not just for buying equipment, but for building a military system that can keep improving over time. India can invest in more systems, more research, and more industrial capacity. Pakistan has to be much more selective. That means India has more flexibility even when programs move slowly or encounter delays. It can afford a broader modernization effort because it has more resources to work with. Pakistan has to be careful about where it spends and how it prioritizes. That does not make Pakistan weak, but it does make its modernization path much more constrained. The industrial base is just as important. India has a much larger defense industrial ecosystem and a much stronger long-term ambition to build more of its own equipment. That creates strategic depth, even though the process is often slow and bureaucratic. Pakistan has a smaller industrial base and depends more heavily on foreign partnerships and external supply chains. That means it can still field serious forces, but it has less room to scale on its own. Industrial strength matters because wars are not only won by what you have on day one, they are also won by what you can maintain, replace, and repair. India has more depth in that area. Pakistan is more limited. Over time, that gives India a stronger position, especially if a prolonged conflict ever forced both sides to rely on stocks, logistics, and repair capacity. Now the part that makes this rivalry especially dangerous: nuclear weapons. This is the reason the India-Pakistan balance can never be treated like a normal conventional comparison. Both countries are nuclear armed, and both know that escalation could move very quickly. India's nuclear posture is built around deterrence and retaliation. Pakistan's posture is built around making even limited war carry unacceptable risk. That means the threshold for conflict is always politically sensitive. India may have the stronger conventional military, but Pakistan can still make a conflict extremely dangerous by signaling escalation risk early. That is one reason South Asian crises are so hard to manage. Neither side can ignore what happens if a conventional confrontation begins to climb the ladder. Pakistan's nuclear posture is one of its most powerful strategic tools because it changes India's decision-making. It does not make Pakistan stronger in every military category, but it makes the cost of military action much more complicated. India knows this, which is why its strategy has to balance conventional dominance with careful escalation management. That balance is difficult and it shapes every crisis. There is also the China factor, and that adds a second layer to the rivalry. Pakistan's relationship with China gives it strategic backing, access to equipment, and external support that improves its position. That does not make Pakistan stronger than India overall, but it does improve Pakistan's strategic resilience. India has to think not just about Pakistan itself, but about the wider support network behind it. That is why India keeps modernizing across land, air, sea, missiles, and industry. It cannot afford to assume that the rivalry will remain purely bilateral. The broader regional environment matters, especially as China's military power continues to grow. India has to prepare for more than one kind of challenge at once. So who is stronger in 2026? On overall conventional military power, India is clearly stronger. It has the bigger force, the larger budget, the stronger navy, and the deeper industrial base. It also has more strategic depth and more room to absorb losses. Pakistan is smaller and more constrained, but it is still highly dangerous because its military doctrine is built to impose costs and force caution. That is the real balance. India is the stronger military power. Pakistan is the more dangerous spoiler. India can outbuild Pakistan over time, but Pakistan can still make any war costly, complicated, and risky. That is why the rivalry remains one of the most important military balances in the world. If you think about what a real conflict would look like, the first 72 hours would matter enormously. India would likely try to use scale, speed, and precision to create early pressure and limit Pakistan's room to maneuver. Pakistan would likely try to respond quickly, show resilience, and signal that escalation could get out of control. That early phase would not be about total victory. It would be about shaping the crisis before it becomes unmanageable. And that is exactly why this comparison is so serious. India has the stronger overall military, but Pakistan still has enough capability to prevent any easy outcome. India has the advantage in size, depth, budget, and naval strength. Pakistan has the advantage of a force posture built around making escalation dangerous. So even in 2026, this rivalry remains one of the most unstable and closely watched military balances on the planet. The bottom line is simple. India is stronger overall. Pakistan is smaller but still dangerous. India can fight longer, build more, and sustain more. Pakistan can still make the cost of conflict uncomfortably high. That is why this comparison matters, and why the balance between these two countries will keep drawing attention in 2026 and beyond.